Ok, Pablo. Testing.
Let's start with that.
Should we get started?
Recording in progress.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their phones and beepers. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the city commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to resolution number 2021-118, the city of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. Accordingly, any individual wishing to provide sworn testimony shall be present physically in the city commission chambers. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments non-sworn and without evidentiary value virtually. Accordingly, only individuals who wish to provide public comment in this format may appear and provide those comments via Zoom. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist pursuant to the City of Coral Gables, ordinance number 2006-11, must register with the city clerk prior to engaging in lobbying activities or presentations before city staff, boards, committees, and/or city commission. A copy of the ordinance is available in the office of the city clerk. Failure to register and provide the proof of registration shall prohibit your ability to present to the board. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of March 1, 2022 to order. The time is 6:02. Jill, if you'd please call the roll.
Robert Behar,
Here.
Alex Buscella, Claudia Miro,
Here.
Luis Revuelta, Biddy Torre,
Here.
Chip Withers,
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. Ex parte, notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communication and site visits. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside of public hearing between a member of the public and a member of the quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such visit. In either case, the board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and/or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial, competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any board member of the board have such a communication and/or site visit to disclose at this time? No.
No.
Item E2 is a quasi-judicial item that is on the agenda. Is there anybody here who will be speaking on item E2? If so, we will ask you to be sworn in.
In this case, I believe just staff would be the only one to be sworn in for that item, unless there's somebody in the audience that is going to be testifying on E2.
Thank you. Everyone who speaks this evening must complete the roster on the podium. We ask that you print your name clearly on the official records of your name and address will be correct. We also ask if there's anybody that wants to speak via Zoom, I'll ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open their chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Next, we have the approval of the minutes of February 9th, 2022 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion. We have a second by Vinnie. Any comments? Call the roll, please.
Claudia Miró,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Maybe Eisenstadt.
Yes. The procedure we'll use for tonight's meeting is as follows. First, we'll have the identification of agenda item by Mr. Caller, presentation by staff, and presentation by applicant or agent. In this case, staff is doing the presentation. Then I'll go ahead and open it for public comment, first in chamber, then Zoom platform, and then the phone line platform. Afterwards, we'll close the public comment, have board discussion, motion, further discussion, and a second of a motion. And then board's final comments and a vote if necessary. Thank you. Mr. Caller?
Item E1 and E2 are related, so I'm going to read both in. Item E1, an ordinance of the City Commission granting approval of proposed amendments to the text of the City of Coral Gables Comprehensive Plan pursuant to expedited state review procedures and Zoning Code Article 14 Process Section 14-213 Comprehensive Plan Text and Map Amendments to provide that the maximum number of floors in the comprehensive plan shall not apply to any planned area development upon City Commission approval, and to allow an additional height bonus in return for a limiting density for qualifying planned area developments within the central business district, providing for a severability clause, repeal of provision, and providing for an effective date. Item E2, an ordinance of the City Commission providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 2, Zoning District, Section 2-500, Planned Area Development, PAD, to provide that upon City Commission approval, the maximum number of stories in any PAD shall not apply, and to create a height bonus to PAD minimum development standards in the Central Business District, providing additional height with a limit of density for qualifying properties upon City Commission approval, providing for severability clause, repeal of provision, codification, providing an effective date. Items E1, E2, public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Trias?
Mr. Chairman, you have seen these items before and you voted on them. However, it's necessary to have a vote for or against. The last vote was 2-2 in order to forward the comprehensive plan amendment to the state. So that's why it's here before you again. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to help, but nothing has changed as far as the content of the request. A little bit of extra height to 205 feet in certain areas of the downtown with a limit of 100 acres of density.
Any other?
That's it. I'm done. I think most of you are familiar with it, so I don't want to. But if you have any questions, I'll be happy to.
I do have a question.
Yeah, please.
All right. I don't agree with, and I think this, I wasn't here in the last time this came out, but I saw it in TV. I don't agree that we should be limiting the density in the CBD area. On the contrary, that's where you want the density to a minimum. But what I think this is doing is seeking that if you give the caveat of 100 units per acre, you could go up to 205 feet, 6 inches, right?
Yes, sir.
It says current number of stories, you are 14 with Med 1, 16 stories with Mediterranean level 2 bonus. This will have no limit on the number of stories.
For a PAD.
On a PAD.
Yeah. So there's a few moving parts here. One of them is, this does not affect the current regulations. If you are not taking advantage of this, you can still do unlimited density within the rules. Clearly, there's a limit eventually. But the second issue is that it only applies to PADs.
Wait, say that again. What did you just say about height?
This, if you are doing a PAD in which you're limiting to 100 units per acre, you could go up from 190 feet 6 inches to 205 feet 6 inches.
Right.
You get an extra 15 feet.
Right.
Um,
To the roof line, not to the
not to the architectural
ornamental or whatever.
treatment or whatever,
Correct.
to the
yes.
roof deck.
Right.
Okay, so essentially you're getting 15 feet more.
But I thought the argument for that was higher ceilings and grander spaces and higher retail, two-story retail on the bottom and things like that, no? We talked about more pedestrian amenities in exchange for this. And I think that was your thought, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you got no limits. I'm okay going to 205 feet. What about if somebody comes in and says, I want to do 19 stories now?
No, that's something that somebody could do. But in addition, in the update that we had recently, there was a minimum height for the ground level that was added to the code. So there's some other limits.
But if you do currently, in 190, you could do 17 stories at 10 feet. That's 170. And you don't need so much for the parking. And then you could do 20 feet for the ground floor, right?
Right.
What I think this is doing is opening up the possibility to go for an extra story, 19 stories.
The other issue is that it's a PAD, so it's discretionary. It's reviewed. The commission may say yes, may say no. So it's not by right by any means.
This is how I would feel about it. What really matters is the FAR. Correct. Really, the impact of the property, of the project is really because of the FAR. The heights are not so impactful. The FAR is what's here. The FAR is not being challenged or changed by this. Basically, in one particular project could be
Right.
300,000 feet. To massage the size of the units, reducing it, leaves the square footage to go towards the office side. You're shrinking the density, you're shrinking the amount of units, you're not shrinking the FAR. In a sense, what you're doing is you're creating more of an impact from the commercial part of the project than you are from the residential part of the project. And I think the intent, from what I understand it, was to, in the eyes of the proposal, was to reduce the impact on the streets and traffic and so forth, which I don't believe that's the way I feel about it, but that's the objective. If you take and don't reduce the FAR and you push it all over towards the commercial, in reality, you got people driving in the morning, driving at 5 o'clock, and creating that middle day traffic, which is less impactful, or I should say more impactful, than the morning person that leaves at 7 or 8, comes back at 5 and parks their car. So there's, to me, more of an impact by shifting towards the commercial if the FAR is not affected. So I think there was a motion here to help a project, which I believe is a good project. So I have been very my voice has been loud that density in the downtown should not be reduced. It's something that I don't quite believe is the right way of doing it. I'm prepared to vote for this to go forward. I don't think that the impact of this change is going to make any real impact. You have to have 1 acre in the middle of downtown to do a PAD. So I think that the overall impact is not going to be any way, shape, or form impactful to us. Again, big units can be great. They rent for more money, economies change, and then when you have 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, they sell for a lot more money. Now, that may be good in one economy, but it may not be good in another economy. So it doesn't matter. These things may happen today, but 5 years from now, nobody may want to build bigger units. So it doesn't, to me, make a big impact. I've been against it. I'm prepared to make this vote go forward. I'd like this project to go forward, and I know this is attached to one particular project.
You will
What I,
get, you will,
if I may, what I'd like to do is recognize that Louis has joined our meeting. If you please count him in.
the project is scheduled for next week.
I understand.
Look, and I agree with you. I think this is a good project going forward, and I don't have a problem, and Chip, this is going, if you were to do higher ceilings, okay? I think that would be, if you got bigger unit, you want to have higher ceiling. We're all in favor of that. I just don't want to see, try to, circumvent later and says, I want to do low ceilings to get
Higher density.
higher, even though, but this only limits to 100 units per acre, right? So you can never do it. Look, answer my own questions.
What I'd like to do, let's go ahead and open it to the public. Is there anybody here that would like to speak on items E1 or E2? Jill, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Yes, we do.
How many speakers?
1.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Gillis,
My name is Brett Gillis, and I'm calling because, yes, can you hear me?
can you please state your name?
My name is Brett Gillis,
With your address, please?
915 Ferdinand Street, Coral Gables.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm calling because I have a question for staff, because we're talking about how it seems like, you're talking about the properties that are increasing from the commercial high rise, if it would go up to 205.5 feet. But it looks like within the central business district, there are properties that are still zoned low and mid rise. So that's only 50 or 70 feet. So I wanted to know how this would impact those properties, especially in the area bordering the craft section.
We'll go ahead and ask those questions to staff. Do you have any other comments based on E1 or E2?
Well, that was mainly just a question, but my comment, just from a philosophical standpoint, would be that we just had a zoning code rewrite or update that was supposed to resolve a lot of these zoning issues, and it seems like every month the agendas keep getting bigger with more amendments and more proposals. So I'd also like staff to address that. Why, after the zoning update that was supposed to resolve these issues, why are we still having these cases come up and tailoring the zoning code to that after we've had a complete overhaul that we paid a consultant a tremendous amount of money? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This was an idea proposed by the city commission, discussed by the city commission, it was approved by the city commission. This is something that happened after the update, so that is normal, that happens all the time. I mean, people come up with new ideas, and that's the way the projects and the zoning codes evolve. As far as the zoning and the land use, it has, obviously, the land use has to allow for this, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't. And what happens is that this is for a very specific area in the central business district for very specific conditions for a PAD, which has to be an acre. And the idea is that the limited density could be seen as a benefit for development in that area. That is what the commission believed.
So when you say limited density, you mean that instead of having 3 two-bedroom apartments where there's 6 cars, you have 1 6-bedroom apartment with 2 cars? Is that what you mean by limited density?
That's one way to look at it, yes.
No, I mean, was that the intent of the commission? I mean,
That's the way I understand it, yes.
So the FAR is not changing.
The number of units,
The number of beds are changing.
The number of units is what's used to quantify the impact, usually, in terms of traffic, trips, in terms of parking, et cetera. So less units, in theory, will be less impact. I mean, that's the thinking
Right,
behind it.
that's the,
Yeah.
my point is, if the units make up so much square feet, bigger units, smaller units, all that goes to the commercial. It's not changing the total map.
Right.
I mean, technically, you're right. You could do 100 units, okay? And you could do 100,000 square feet of office.
Yeah,
Right?
you could have TDRs and get to 4.375, and your scenario is realistic, yes.
And you're not gonna decrease the intensity of that project. On the contrary, you're gonna increase it. So, in theory, it's good because you're reducing density in that area.
Just like anything, this is not a theoretical exercise. You are going to get a project based on that next week. So there's a way to test some of these ideas and to see what one of the intents could be. And I think in that case, in that project, the idea was to do large units. So the number of units was not the issue. The FAR remained large, but the number of units was decreased compared to some other downtown project.
The project, I feel, is fine, and I think height issue, to me, doesn't become a real issue. It's what's given as an incentive and the trade. So the trade here, I think you have it in your paperwork, is 4 or 5 things that have to be provided for to get the approval.
There's
Those three-
additional green space at the ground level,
Right.
MEP bonus, and the 100 units per acre cap. I think that's basically it.
Right, and I think that what I would have preferred, and again, that's a proposal, and I disagree, but that's fine, is that we focus on the quality of what's on the ground floor, that we provide for very interesting places to walk by, places that are active, and that should be more of the incentive. And the quality of what you see and touch on the ground floor could be a really good incentive. Could be products, could just be other things. That's just a different way of looking at it. But again, that's just the way I perceive it.
And I think that in Coral Gables in particular, most of the projects do such a good job at the ground level that we take it for granted almost that that's going to happen. You'll see what this project is doing.
No, but here's where this is going. So we're doing a lot of projects that are full block.
Yes.
They just tend to be that way because the incentive is to do big projects. Economically speaking, that's what's driving the developments, and so does our code. It incentivizes 200 feet plus. When you do that, the blocks become very hard to make them as interesting as smaller parcels that we're knocking down that are interesting because you walk by an attorney, you walk by different things. Here you have one person creating a streetscape from end to end that has control of what that looks like. And again, it could be blank walls, it could be, I passed by Mercedes-Benz, not that that's a good example, but you would want to be very bored walking past Mercedes-Benz because there's nothing to look at. It's a peril, it's a bad example. But the incentive would be to have active, interesting ways to walk down the CBD. And it's not because anything else. This is the central business district that should be interesting to walk past the first block or the second block. So Aragon or Andalusia or Sevilla should be interesting blocks if you can make them so, versus not, if you can make them so.
We try.
Exactly, and that's all I'm saying is that would be a great incentive to try to continue to have that feeling of it's interesting.
I mean, the issue is whether or not the zoning code is the right tool to do those things. And in my view, the zoning code is very limited in what it can do in terms of quality. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, the review by Board of Architects or even the review by staff, which apparently no one takes into account anymore, that really allows the projects to implement the things that you're talking about. It's about design. And design is a different set of skills than what you find in the zoning code in terms of the tool, as you well know. I mean, I'm not saying something new.
But here's the thing, when you did the design area, forget the area you call it, the design innovation area.
Innovation and design
There's
district.
things you did there to create, the glass have to be lower, you have to have certain things like that, to make sure that those things were being done. It wasn't like, this is not new, you actually did it.
We certainly we can do more. And one of the things that we have been able to do is implement a minimum height that is a little bit higher for the ground level, which allows for the higher quality retail. So, I mean, these things can be done, but as you well know, we went through the update, you all went through the update also. And my goal was to really create a lot of the tools that would be useful. And at the end, we ended up with many things, but not everything that I think would be needed. So there's a point in which the process limits the ability to do many of those things. So that's just the way it
I want
is.
to say, look, there's good intentions here, and I appreciate the good intentions, right? So the project has some great aspects to it. The height is great, so I think that the proposal to give the incentive be on density is against what I believe, my personal opinion,
And
is
you made that very clear.
right,
And I think that's the role.
and that's how I'm judging it. Otherwise, I think the project is fine, and I think that this doesn't really change a lot.
I think that's the role of the planning and zoning to make those points. And equally, the commission has made it very clear that this is what they support.
Understood, yeah.
So I have a philosophical question, kind of picking up on what Brett said. I always thought that a planned area, a pad was always when you had a site, you had multiple buildings on it, and you wanted to move massing to one side of it to make it more accommodating, either for traffic flow or design. So how does a pad really work when you only have one building?
Well,
I mean, why don't we just give a variance? I mean, I'm serious about that. I mean,
what are the public benefits? Well, the extra open space of the ground level and the ability, maybe the ability to design.
but you're not really moving massing around, which I thought was one of the big intentions of having a.
And those are probably the best pads, the one that have.
Yeah, 5 or 6 buildings, yeah.
Or 20 buildings.
Or 20, right.
You know, yes, I like those. In fact, we had one recently, right? And what happens is that then there's the ones that has 3 buildings, like the 2020 Salcedo, and then the ones that have one
And the one we had over just north of the youth center there was probably a pretty good example,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
And some of them have been residential mostly, and some of them have been large buildings. So that is the nature of the process. And what happens is that in this case, this emphasizes or this leads to larger buildings. I believe that's true. And that's something that we all need to consider. Now, large buildings in the context of Coral Gables, not in the context of, let's say, Brickell Avenue.
I understand.
So you know, within the rules.
So as a tool, is the pad a good use for a single building site?
I don't think it's the ideal. I mean, I think that what happens with the pad is that it may give you some breaks as far as the setbacks or stepbacks, which, if done skillfully, is wonderful. But if it's not done skillfully, then you have the issue that, okay, you know, what is the public benefit in terms of design? That is why we have a process that focuses only on design, which is the Board of Architects. If properly applied, I think that's the best way to address those issues. But it's a team effort. I mean, everybody has to work on it, and each of the boards have a role to play. So what I'm bringing to you is what the commission has
I know,
supported.
I read their minutes and I understand.
Jill, do we have any other speakers?
No, we don't.
Okay, at this time, let's go ahead and close it for public comment. Chip, you want to continue?
I'm done.
Louis?
I have a couple of questions because I'm sorry I was late. Is this 200, Luis Revuelta, is this 205.5 change specific to this project only, or is this a generic code change?
It's a generic code change that is inspired by an example that is coming before you.
So this is in essence reverse engineering, reverse zoning, and I've expressed this before. I have a major problem when I read a code and I see a number that I say, who came up with this number? Obviously, we know how this number is been coming about, so I don't have a problem with the project. I think, like Vinny, I don't have a project. I don't have the same issue that he has of giving up density for height. But I strongly feel that this should be a number, 200 feet. And I know that they can make this project work with 200 feet. This 205.5, frankly, it's just driving me nuts. But, you know, I might be the only one. Because I see this in codes all the time, and it's like total reverse political urban planning, or, you know, whatever it is. So that's one question that we can debate or put to death. The other one is what Robert mentioned. If this project gets a height, what is the maximum stories that you can put under the zoning classification or a pad? Is it 20 stories? Is it 21? Is it 17? I don't know if everybody knows that. I'm sorry if I'm ignorant about it, but I like to know, because I think there also has to be, to your point, a certain limit that people don't decide to somehow squeeze.
Possibly you could add a maximum number of stories as part of the recommendation you make, which in this case probably will be 18. I mean,
How many stories does this building has right now?
the one proposed for
The one
next week
proposed, yeah, because I mean,
is 18.
18?
But wouldn't the project have to be really skinny to start going up to the extent that mass has to be?
Well, and frankly, I think one of the things that zoning codes should do is give some flexibility to architect and developer to come up with different massing, right? Some guys say, well, I want to go 20 stories, but I want to do a shorter building. That would be a good thing, I think. As long as FAR is not changing, as long as density is not changing, so intensity and density are not changing, I think to put on the ordinance a number that to me makes sense, and this one doesn't make sense, and a number of stories to guard ourselves from somebody going crazy or not sensitive or skillfully, but give that flexibility that if somebody wants to do a smaller envelope, but a little bit taller, I would be comfortable with 20 stories, 200 feet.
Right, that's-
If you do X, Y, and Z,
You're the architects, right? You both would know this best. If you have the same FAR and you're putting more floors, you do have to cramp it. You have to squeeze it, right? So as long as it looks right, is there a problem? I mean, I'm asking.
But the issue is that the FAR really becomes 4.375. Really, that's what happens because of the TDR. So it's a significant amount of FAR. If it was limited to 2, for example, it's different. Which is not the case. I mean, the case
I
is
was
3,
late. My
3.5,
apologies.
4.375.
Those are my comments.
I agree with Vinny that I think the streetscape is very important, especially when you're taking such large areas and creating, from block to block, one building or one project. For example, in the last project that we saw, there were some elements to the ground floor that created a nice division, that created sort of like a streetscape.
Sure.
And I like that, but there were a lot of people that were against that, didn't like that. It wasn't part of their way of looking at it. If I would leave it up to the Board of Architects whether it needs to be 20 feet high for the commercial and 10 feet, or I would leave it up to the architects that are with us. But I do feel that it's important to do a streetscape, especially in a project of this magnitude and of this size. I think that's critical. And you got to see what you give to the public that walks by. And Vinny gave a really good example. I mean, it's not to pick on Mercedes or anything like that, but you want to have an element not only of design, but something that gives back to the community. Whether it's an open space, and it benefits the public also and so forth. I mean, that would be something very nice.
No, absolutely. And like I said, right now we have 5% additional to the PAD of 20%. So that's the one of the public benefits.
Okay.
Now, clearly, this is not a solution for quality. Obviously, there's much more that could be here in the code, but there's a point in which micromanaging through zoning doesn't work either. So, I mean, we need to find some balance.
We have two items. E1 is legislative, and E2 is
I mean,
quasi-judicial.
technically, the comp plan is the one that we need a vote for real, that is positive or negative, one way or the other.
Which would be really E1
Yeah.
in this case.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. That's okay. So Mr. Revuelto is talking about making some recommendations. Since they're the architects, are there any recommendations that you see that we could make at this point with this project?
I would make maximum 200 feet, maximum 20 stories. And if Vinny or wants to add something about additional public benefits on the
Streetscape?
ground level, I'll be willing to.
I mean, I'm not sure what the right wording, brings forth exceptional ground level architecture and streetscape appeal, or I don't know what the right term is, but.
Well, I mean, if you think about the two streetscapes that we have, they're nice, Miracle Miles and Giralda, those were projects. Those were not zoning language. So there's a distinction or a range from a project to zoning, and somewhere in between, certainly we can have some more recommendations, but I mean, at this point, 20 stories, I think that would be too many. I mean, frankly.
I would agree. I respectfully, Louis, I think that 20 stories, you're gonna.
You want to make it 18?
I would cap it at 18 stories.
fine
That
with
way, I would, if I want to give the incentive to have less units, bigger unit, they need to be taller, and that was the whole
That's the whole purpose.
That's the whole reason.
purpose.
I would
So
find
18 stories, how many feet?
I would do 18 stories. The 200 feet, I mean, I'm okay with that too. I don't know how everybody else feels. 205 feet, 6 inches, obviously there is, I'm okay with your recommendation of 200 feet, but I will cap it at 18 stories.
I would be fine with that.
Yeah, and in terms of process, this has to be sent to the state, so it takes a while for it to come back and go to commission, so there's a chance to have any kind of conversation you may want to have.
I have one last question. If the project applied for a PAD and is getting some benefits and giving something back, what's going to be the overall length that they can develop the tower?
Right. We don't have that level of detail in the code, as you know, and other codes do. I mean, that's something that staff has been working on some ideas because of your leadership in this. But I think at some point that would be very helpful to have a maximum increment. I mean, that's why many of the European cities we like so much is because they have a lot of relatively small buildings. I mean, they may be tall, but they're not big in terms of the floor plate. And that's what gives a lot of the quality of the architecture. So,
Well, as much as I said that I have a problem with the way that length was determined by another municipality in town, I think that even the fact that the Gables has no limit, I think there's got to be a middle point somewhere where you can break up building mass lengths. That would be good. No, I don't want to stir the pot here, throw a monkey wrench in the whole process here. So, but I think I think we should talk about it every once in a while because
I think it's called out on section 5.100, 150 feet, you have to have a break. This is under
in the facade, yes, but the building could continue to be, yes. So we're talking about architectural articulation more than different massing.
But this building essentially could go from street to street
Yes,
in terms of.
It could.
but you'll see it next week.
You guys know this better than anybody else. What's driving that is parking. You have to have a parking garage that's big enough to make it worth the while of building a parking garage. Plus, then you have multiple elevator cores, and multiple stairs. So the issue of the large building is to
But
be able.
No, and I
having said that,
understand that, but what happens in many municipalities and many projects is that you have a parking pedestal that basically needs to be the size that it needs to be given the current zoning regulations, and that's understandable, but then the tower that goes on top of it doesn't necessarily do need to be the same length as the pedestal. That's where I think
Yeah.
the overmassing begins to create problems for architects, neighbors, board members.
But I disagree in the sense that what you're talking about, the parking pedestal, is what's on the ground floor, and it's what you perceive the most.
Yeah, and that is not what this project is. And I'll be, maybe I should be more clear. Even though the project, yeah, it takes the whole site, some of it is parking, some of it is courtyard, open space, some of it is arcade. There's a variety of things.
This has a freestanding garage,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So what happens is that the actual building, again, I'm just using it for illustration since they're gonna have it, it's already a public record, I mean, it's been submitted. So the building actually goes all the way to the ground, which is nice. I mean, if you have the ability, that may be the answer to your question. The PAD in those cases allows for parking to be here and the building actually be on the other end of the design all the way to the ground, for example, which is, I think, a good thing.
I understand.
And that is a good thing. That is a good thing.
Every time we've been able to do that, which has been a couple of times, I mean, or more than that, actually, the results are very good because you end up with a building that has no pedestal. And that, to me, is the difference between, let's say, Coral Gables and Berkeley, for example.
But it depends at what cost it's good then, because if you have a blocky 6-story parking garage by itself, may not be a good thing either.
No, it has to be designed properly, obviously.
Okay, I mean, you really, it's all contextually how it is done correctly.
Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make it. We have a couple of recommendations. I just want to make sure we either agree on, disagree on. You had a 200, both of you guys had a 200-foot cap on an 18th floor?
Correct.
18th floor, max? And I
I
believe,
don't know if, Robert, did you have a 200 or?
No, I was just following Lewis. I mean, I don't have a problem with either or. 18 stories will be my recommendation.
Do we have to go as high as 200? Can we go lower?
If, my opinion, if you are gonna do bigger units and you're gonna do 18 stories, I think just mathematically you could say, okay, the ground floor will be 20 feet. You know, each floor after that is a little bit over, like 11 feet. You know, that would be appropriate. I think that's the intent. So I think 200 would be the minimum to make it quality spaces inside. Because it's not like you have in this particular project, you don't have a podium parking and the building on top. You got 18 stories or whatever, and a detached garage. So, I mean,
But
It's
remember,
not
we're not
detached
looking at,
exactly, but, yeah.
well,
It's attached to the building, but it's in a different part
but
of the site.
it's not underneath the building, it's next to it.
Right.
now, these are just recommendations. The commission can just, do it the way they feel.
They're going to do whatever.
Well,
Right,
like I
so-
said, this has to be sent to the state for
Correct.
comment, and they'll tell us. What I anticipate is that they'll say that it's a good idea to limit density. That's probably what they'll say.
but just to understand your role on the comp plan, you're designated as the LPA. And so in order to either yay or nay on this, in order to move forward, they need a recommendation one way or another from the land planning agency, which is you. So that's why we advised in the last vote that we needed a recommendation. So that's kind of where we are with this.
But does that land comp plan change depend on a yes vote, or?
No, you can have a no vote.
Yeah, that's fine.
As long as you have a recommendation, whether it's yes or no, it doesn't matter, just as long as you have a recommendation from the LPA, which is what you're sitting as for the comp plan amendment. The second item, you can choose to wind up with a recommendation, or you could choose, let's say it were a tie vote. That's okay, but it's really the the first item that is where we need a recommendation in order for it to go forward one way or the other.
Robert,
You want to make the recommendation?
you want to make the recommendation? Lewis,
Yes, I'll make a recommendation.
go ahead, please.
So this is going to be a motion, is that correct?
Well, I make the motion to approve
With recommendation?
the item with the staff recommendation and with the two recommendations of capping the building at 200 feet and no more than 18 stories.
So it's really a motion to approve on a modified basis from
With
the
the
department
recommendation.
recommendation, which is
Louis,
maximum 18 stories and 200 feet.
Louis, before I vote, I want to say something else. I'm thinking if you're gonna do an 18-story building and you're gonna have 20 feet on the ground floor, and if I want to have
11 feet?
10-foot clear, right?
You're going to have a slab that is 10 or 11 inches, you're going to have a
Even-
218 high.
No. If you have if you do a post-tension building, and we're talking architects here,
He's a better
10.67.
structural engineer than I am.
No,
He's going to do it in 8 inches, but go ahead.
well, post-tension slab 8 inches. It gives me 181 feet 4 inches plus 20 feet.
That's
200.
121 feet and 4.5 inches.
No. 100. No.
I'm reading your calculation.
If you, I know I'm gonna go slow so you can read it slowly. 17 stories.
No,
times
18.
10 point. No, because the 18th floor is the ground floor. So if you do 10.67 times 17, it's 181.
Plus 20 feet.
20. It's 100.
201. 0.30.
Right. So
4.5 inches.
I think 200 feet is not gonna give you that 10-foot ceilings.
They could do the ground level at 18 feet, and that would not make a hill of difference.
No, you're right. That could happen.
Yeah,
That
so, and again, if you guys want to vote for 205.5, you know what?
The motion's been made, 200 feet,
So,
18 stories, that's the motion. Anything else to that
I
motion?
just like some rationality in the code, right? And sometimes you read these codes that are totally arbitrary. And this is just, coming up with this number is reverse engineer, specifically to this project. And when you're making code changes, I believe they should be generic to the city, to the municipality, and to other properties and to other projects.
But let me ask you a question. If you're looking at a building that's 200 feet, or you're looking at a building that's 5 foot bigger, or 3 foot bigger, do you see a difference at all?
No, zero. As a matter of fact, urbanists will tell you that the most important part of the building is the first 50 feet. After that, it could be 180 feet, and you would not be able to tell the difference.
So if that's the case, I'm not an architect, but if that's the case, and you cap it at 200, aren't you sacrificing on the design of the project by doing that?
As an architect, I can tell you, absolutely not. But if you guys feel comfortable with 205.5, go at it. I'll vote yes.
Is there a motion on the table?
I made a motion with those two recommendations, 200 feet max, 18 stories, and staff recommendations. Now, if you guys,
So we have a motion. Is there a
Well,
second?
no, I wanted to ask a question. I thought, Benny, didn't you have a recommendation as well for
Well, I
ground
wanna see
level
if this
streets?
gets a
no,
second.
I'm finished.
If it
actually
goes
said-
forward or not,
If you want to add to that
Well, I was
recommendation for your
gonna
do a
concerns.
different. I was gonna do
Mr.
different.
Huerta, what I would propose is that 200 is equally arbitrary as 205. So there's no real distinction in terms of whether it's arbitrary or not.
As we are two Spaniards,
I mean,
I would rest. But it's okay. Frankly, I don't want to make a big deal about it, so I already did, so it's whatever you guys want.
I'll make a motion. So the motion is 205.5?
No, the
That's
motion
the-
is
that's the-
200.
No, I was gonna make it different. I'm waiting for a second, otherwise I'll make a motion. If it's gonna be a second, we'll take a vote. I'll hold on.
I'll second it.
Now, I'm not sure what it is, what the motion is. Can you please say it again? Is it 200, 205?
200.
It's 200.
200, okay. 18 stories?
Before we all vote. So what I was gonna ask is to change it to 205.5, based on the point that we were not gonna notice. Improve the ground floor amenities to the highest degree and cap it at 18 feet. at 18 stories.
So,
So the 18 stands, the 205, I think it's irrelevant. I think at the end of the day, more important to me is what happens on the first 3 floors, first, second.
see, let me tell you what, and we're gonna, that's the motion, to me, it's more important how the relationship of that building is to the sidewalk. You're gonna have a big building that is on a 5-foot sidewalk. To me, that's the biggest concern. Maybe that should be pulled back further.
I think that's all part of the same point I'm trying to make. I think what happens on the ground floor, whether it's that setback, whether it's that great 10, 15 feet of space,
But if you give an arcade, they're proposing that 12-foot arcade. But at the end of the day, and we see some example right here on Lejeune Road, where the building is right up to the property line.
But not anymore, because now you have to set back 10 feet from Lejeune.
That's my concern. That's where you give the public benefits, where the buildings, you have some reliefs. To me, those are more beneficial, urbanistically, than the additional 5 feet. You're absolutely right. 200, 205 feet, nobody's going to see that.
see, the thing is that the approval of all these projects is subjective. So one person's green space is another person's setback, it's another person's colonnade. All these things are somewhat, subjective. I think overall speaking is the intent that the streetscape is bettered. That's a very generic statement. I'm not trying to tell you how to do it. I'm just saying is we should be watchful. We should be cognizant of what happens on the ground floor as a general rule, and that should be the law of the land. In other words, we should be focusing on the ground floor and not extra 5 feet.
Is there a way to add a recommendation as to what happens on the ground floor with?
I don't see any, because the market is going to dictate who leases those spaces, right? So as much as I agree with him, you cannot control the supply and demand. So whether you get a restaurant or a bicycle, I think it's a matter of, as what Robert was saying, what are the setbacks? The arcade, I happen to believe that the arcade is a environmentally friendly architectural device that works. I don't know if 12 feet, it seems like a big arcade. So, but I don't know how to address that other than the fact that when you have big building masses, somehow architecturally they need to be broken up a little bit without sacrificing the project success.
Here's the question. Shouldn't we be proposing or asking the Board of Architects to start taking a closer look at what happens on the ground floor as a general rule? And again, I'm not suggesting that one rule is the next rule is the next. It's just a proposal that this is what should be guiding the approvals.
I'm not sure that's a Board of Architects because every project is different.
They're all subjective.
Yeah, I'm
It's
not
all
sure
rules.
that's.
It's all, there's no specific rule here that says this is what you must do. It's all subjective.
Yeah. Look, for example, if you have a retail on Miracle Mile, let's not use Miracle Mile, on Ponds or something, an arcade is not always a good thing to do because the retail spaces suffer when you have an arcade.
But the code says that's not allowed. It's already on the code. It says that you're not supposed to do that. That one specifically is blocked.
Every project is different. I don't know if and Ramon, you could, maybe confirm this or not. The Board of Architects to give them prescribed direction, I don't know if that's a good thing to do.
Look, we've been talking about this for a long time recently. And the bottom line is that you need to have flexibility, otherwise you do not get quality. I mean, the easiest thing to do is to have design guidelines that I can check, we're done. Does that give you a beautiful city? No. And I don't want to mention some of the cities that do that in other counties and so on where I have worked, but frankly, that's not Coral Gables. Coral Gables is very professional. It expects a lot of expertise. That's why we have all the boards and things. And even then, the citizens have an opportunity to give their opinions and explain how everybody's doing a bad job. So all of that eventually leads to quality, I think. Eventually, it's just that that's the way the process is. To think that you can micromanage that at the zoning code level is not realistic.
Can I make a friendly amendment to our motion that we do go with the 205 feet, 6 inches, cap it at the 18 stories, and follow the plan department's recommendation.
One quick question. Is there a minimum or a maximum depth of a arcade in the code? Does it have to be a minimum of 3 feet, 5 feet, and no more than 15, 12? I'm sorry for my ignorance.
We use a 12-foot ideal standard, if we
As a
can.
maximum.
Yeah, well, as a standard.
As a stand,
And if somebody says, like Robert is saying, well, it's gonna
Robert
hurt
never
my-
does 6-foot arcades, okay? And I want to say that clearly. You'd always done very nice wide arcades
thank you.
properly.
repeat that again one more time.
Robert has always done arcades that are about 12 feet wide, which is the ideal dimension. Some architects have tried to do less than they've
But
been told.
he was bringing up a good point, that if you're gonna do retail, you don't want the retail to, if it's a restaurant, great, because you can have outside seating, but if it's
For
retail.
restaurants, it's great, yes.
What I'm wondering, and my question, is there a minimum, in order to get their bonuses, a minimum depth of an arcade? Is it 6 feet? Is there a number, I guess the question?
6 feet is not really.
No, I'm not suggesting 6 feet, I'm asking if there is in the code something.
There used to be something. I remember years ago, something, limiting the minimum you could do for that particular reason.
Yeah, no, that's a big issue for obvious reasons. My only advice is that we're here to deal with a very specific issue. We're not here to brainstorm today.
Yeah.
Brainstorm about many things that we can do in the code. We can do many things in the code. We spent 3 years working on that, and we were able to implement some things, and at the same time, we also were not able to do many other things. So I don't think that's a good use of our time right now, but if you want to have a structured way to deal with those ideas, we could do that, certainly.
I was just asking, so.
Okay, so we had a motion. I recommended a friendly amendment to that motion of going up to the 205 feet,
The way it's written.
the way it's written, limiting only to 18-story. And not as the maker of the motion, but as a second, I welcome any other input into it.
Can I,
Have
let
we
me just
gotten,
ask a
have we,
question.
just one question, just so I know where we are in the motion. Have we got an agreement from the person who's made the motion to the 205?
Not yet, the
No,
maker.
I'll withdraw my motion, let me make it easy. I'll withdraw the motion, okay? So it's.
Okay, so now we have no, so we no motion on the floor at
motion.
this
All right, so I'm
time.
gonna make the motion to approve with the 205 feet, 6 inches, capping at 18 stories, and with all the staff recommendation, and I'll welcome if there's any friendly amendment that wants to be put in.
Let me ask you a question, Robert. Can this height increase with bonuses of any type? Or can the 18 stories increase with any bonuses of any type?
The Mediterranean level 2 would be required. That's one of the requirements. So it cannot be increased beyond that, but you do have to meet the
But you
requirements.
have to meet those requirements. I
Yes.
just want to be clear on that.
At level 2 med bonus.
Yes.
Level 2, okay. We have a motion by Robert. Anybody want to make a second?
I'm going to say that we won. The discussion was had. We had an hour of this discussion. These things matter. These discussions do go a long way, and I believe people listen. So I believe that we win by doing this. And if it doesn't carry forward, I still think there's a lot to be gained from what we discuss here. So I'll leave it as is. But I think we did discuss what I believe was important, and I'll leave it at that.
Are you second?
I'm not making a motion. I mean, I'm not seconding. I'm just putting my point out.
So what is the motion? 205.5 feet with 18 stories? That's basically
205.6, if not mistaken, the way
Point
it's
five.
Yeah, 205.5, meaning 6 inches, and 18 stories is the new.
And we haven't even talked about mezzanines or amenity floors or anything, have we? So
That's separate in the code, yes.
So at this point, we have a motion, but we don't have a second.
Who made a motion?
That is correct.
I will second the motion.
Chip second the motion. Any discussion?
I just wanted to ask, whatever happened to the ground floor recommendations about the streetscape that we were discussing? Is that out the window, or do we still want to? And I know we asked the city attorney if there was a way that we could do that I guess I'm just not sure if we say maximum, what was the word that you used, Benny?
Excellent.
Excellent, architectural
I mean,
streetscape.
yeah, there's a hard, this is not an easy way to describe it, but we're trying to achieve a better streetscape, but I'm not sure what that describes.
And we'll see next week what it looks like, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Well, first, as you know, we're not dealing with a specific project here. So this is being written for them. It's difficult with the term excellent because the problem with the zoning code is there needs to be certain concrete terms. Compatibility is an acceptable term actually in zoning, but to say excellent is just,
Understood.
it's beyond having a definition to it.
Look, let's not kid ourselves. This project is coming next week. This is specifically written for that project.
Right.
Yes,
That's it, guys.
but it does apply, and the point I'm making is, I know, it's no secret that this applies to any project within this area. There may never be another project.
There's a motion
I
and
would feel
there's
more
a second.
I was just going to say, I would feel more comfortable if we had that added on. I don't know what the wording is, Mr. Attorney, for some kind of
You'd have to
streetscape.
ask the gentleman.
No, I welcome, I said on the record, I welcome any friendly amendment to that motion.
I'm just not sure what the wording is. I'd be happy to make that friendly amendment. Suggest it, right?
Is there a way to word it? With Claudia
I'll
Ramon?
yield to the
I don't know why
planning
they
director.
ask the attorneys to come up with a language, as they don't practice this line of work. But what happens is that, like I said, we have two ways of doing this. We can have very prescriptive language, meaning every sidewalk will have a bulb out every X number of feet to plant a shade tree that is at least this size, et cetera, et cetera. We can have something like that. And we do have some of that language already in the landscape code, et cetera. There's some minimum standards and so on, materials. We can have that. We can have some aspirational language like Mr. Torre was talking about in terms of, we'll try to come up with a more compatible design that incorporates the sidewalk and the private areas, et cetera. We can say all of that, and we can come up with some language, but that is being done right now. I mean, I've been working here for 10 years, trying to make the city as beautiful as I can, and I get very frustrated by the lack of appreciation that goes on for the process. There's a lot of people that work very hard to do all of that. I mean, every time we have this discussion, it appears that, nobody's ever thought about that. Like, a sidewalk, how do you... We spend hours working on those things. Now, is there a way to have a code that explains that better? Possibly. But we will need to think about it a little bit, and we could come up with some language maybe for a future meeting. But right now, to add a couple of words that are aspirational, I don't know if that's going to accomplish what we're looking for.
So I just want to make one comment. Because a PAD is a conditional use, and when you get PADs, you get the opportunity to evaluate them and specifically what they have designed for the first floor, you will be able to look at that and make a judgment whether you feel that in fact the PAD has accomplished.
And you're not the first ones to look at it. I mean, because when things are said like this, it appears that everything comes to you for the first time. No. There's DRC. There's months. I mean, Mr. Bejar knows how many months it takes sometimes to deal with these issues. All of that is done prior to you being able to take a look at it. So I think that's part of the process already. But certainly we can come up with some additional language if you.
Claudia, I'm not sure that we really have a tool mechanism to do that. I think, and Ramon is correct, that goes through a process, an evolution that I think there's enough checkpoints where that could be looked at.
And also a project would have to come before us so we can make some recommendations based on that site plan that comes before us or that project that comes
Absolutely.
before us at the time.
All PADs have to come through
And
here.
that's the way it's done. Typically, we could come up with a more prescriptive process, but I'm not sure that's going to result in better projects.
And to Lewis's point, when you start doing that, you start, making the project work.
I understand.
I just came up with a word, maybe, I know what you guys just said. Focuses on the improvement of the public realm, or provides more focus, And I'm reading what the PAD is supposed to do already. The PAD by itself standards encourage quality development, public benefits, and promotes compatibility with the architecture and urban design characters surrounding the areas. So it's kind of doing some of it. But in terms of focusing on the improvement of the immediate public realm, I'm not sure, can a sentence of that aspiration be added?
I think an amendment of the code that describes the PAD intent, that's a very good place to do it, to explain that.
All I'm
Yeah.
trying to do is bring focus to this issue. Again, we live with these pedestals, we live with these garages, and they get built, and the little buildings come down, and we lose the fabric of the city. And all I'm saying is, let's do that, but with an intent to not lose it completely. Let's focus on what happens as you walk down these streets.
I think
very
a
general statement.
recommendation to enhance the intent of the language that deals with the intent of the PAD and focuses towards public space may be a way to do this.
I understand the comments that you made, Mr. Trias, and also my colleague, Mr. Behar, and I will echo what Mr. Torres said, that I appreciate the fact that we're having these conversations and that we're being vigilant and that we're bringing these things to the surface. I also echo the sentiment of maybe adding that one-liner. I think it would make me feel better, that we're trying to make sure that we're indeed keeping and making the city beautiful.
I think that's the easiest and most effective way to edit the intent language in the code. I think that's a very good idea.
So, Mr. Behar, would you add that?
I'm gonna withdraw my motion. I'm kidding. Whatever the board feels, I'm okay with it.
And
Yes, I accept it.
you'll accept it. Any other discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Need a motion for E2?
We have to do E2.
E2, and I might suggest the similar amendments, I think is the intent for E2
Well,
as well? Or do we
actually-
need them for
Well,
E2?
in E2 is really where we would do the amendment, because that's the zoning code, as far as the aspirational language. I think there's a more appropriate place, so.
So do we?
Well, I'm not sure that the language in E2 is, the title is expansive enough that it would apply to all PADs. Would be something we'd have to look at. I think the important thing is what the board is saying is some general language with regard to what we've discussed be included in all PADs, not just necessarily related to
Yeah.
these PADs.
What my thinking is, that means an amendment to the PAD language in the zoning code.
Exactly.
That's what that means.
So your suggestion is to parallel it or not?
Yes, but they probably will not be able to act on that language on this item because of the narrow scope of this item. But it gives to the city commission that consider a amendment to all PADs with regard to the focus on the first floor. Public realm focus.
I like that.
Yeah, we could come back with some language that deals with the zoning intent of the PAD that addresses some of those issues. I think that would be
How do
fine.
we resolve then E2?
So E2, I think, is the same amendments, right?
Yes.
18 stories.
Talking exterior.
And the requested feet with the recommendation of consideration of the focus of the public realm in the general PAD ordinance.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Vinnie, second. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Vinnie Torres,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. The next item, which is new business, is E3.
Okay. Item E3, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards, to limit the Mediterranean Bonus Program to Coral Gables Mediterranean architectural style and expand the Board of Architects review process to include an optional conceptual review, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and for an effective date. Item E3, public hearing.
So, Mr. Chairman, there are two changes. One deals with the word Coral Gables Mediterranean style, which remains, and other styles is eliminated in certain areas. So it's a more targeted ordinance towards Coral Gables Mediterranean style. The second important aspect of this is the creation of an optional conceptual review process, meaning somebody could go to the board and have a more informal discussion and hopefully benefit from that without having to get the project approved or denied. Those are the two changes. After significant discussion, I think the conclusion was that these were appropriate and that they enhance the ordinance. Staff recommends approval.
Do we have any, before we proceed, do we have any speakers for this item, Joe?
Not on Zoom.
Not on Zoom. Anybody here that would like to speak on this item? No, at this time I'll go ahead and close the floor, open it up for discussion.
I do have a few questions first for staff, just
Sure.
to clarify. My understanding is that sections 5-100 and beyond has two levels of bonus, which is basically, this is what is getting to the meat of the bonuses. One is the level 1 bonus, and
Yes.
then there's a level 2 bonus. This is applying to the level 1 bonus. The level 2 bonus already has Mediterranean requirements. Is that factual?
I think the biggest change will be on level 1, which before it didn't have such a strict Mediterranean requirement.
Right, but so we're getting to, the FAR increases to 3.2 with this level, and it gets to 3.5 when you get to level 2. Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct, yes.
And the big buildings, which have caused the majority of the issues that I think are causing this to come forth, are the ones that hit level 5, or level 2. Not level 5. Level 2, am I going to the right place?
And I think there was only one level 1 in recent memory.
Right, so when was the last time a level 1 was proposed
I
here?
think when Robert Behar worked on that, when was that? 5 years ago or some time ago. But
Right.
And
but
we
it's-
didn't go for the full.
Right, so, again, we're trying to fix it through a method that deals with something that barely ever happens, and I just don't quite understand
No.
where we're headed and where
Look,
we're headed.
I'm gonna tell you where, and I participated in the Blue Ribbon Commission. And to me, the more meetings that took place, the more discussion, the more I think this is a bad thing. Okay? I believe it's not a good thing to do. To limit this. This is, to me, it's not professionally, I don't think this is gonna, talking about prescribed, architecture, this is gonna lead to specifically that every building should be. And I'm sure that Mr. Trias and I will disagree, and that's okay. That's a good, as long as we're respectful of each other, it's a good thing. I don't think this is good. I think that, I'm gonna give you an example. You got two buildings, the plaza, which incorporates all the med bonuses, and it's I think in recent years as one of those most talked about building. And across the street, you have a building that was done, the old Region Bank building. Today, that building, which I personally, as an architect, I'm sure my colleague will agree, is a good building. It gives a lot of good public benefits along Ponce de Leon, but yet it is not in the spirit of what this is intended to be. So I think that going this direction is, to me, is not the right thing to do. I am totally against it. The same thing I expressed during those Blue Ribbon Committee meetings, I said again, this is gonna make, it's gonna be more of a Boca, when you go up to Boca Raton and you see all the architecture, trying to do the same thing. This is what is, in my professional opinion, what is intended to do and will do. I'm not in favor of this.
Are you in favor of
Keeping what is there today.
No, I understand, but the other part of the item is going for a preliminary voluntary review?
That's an optional. So I mean, you know what? That's okay because it's not a mandatory, it's an optional.
It's optional, yes.
So I don't, is it a good thing that you go to the board to say, look, I'm gonna bring this forward, give me your feedback unofficially, so I don't have to do the whole blown presentation, come back and have problem. I don't have a problem with that. I think that could be a positive, tool to do. I'm just opposed to the strictly Mediterranean looking style building.
You're opposed to taking out other styles from level one?
Correct.
If I can understand.
I'm opposed to changing what we had. I think it works, okay? You got a board of architects that's gonna give you, and again, the example I'm using, I'm sure that that building, that old Region Bank building on Ponce de Leon did get a level 2 because I'm sure it did a lot of the public benefit, incorporated the public benefit that at the end of the day are more beneficial, whether you put a tile roof at, as a plaza at 190 feet, you put a tile roof. And is that a good thing for the public? No, it's not, in my opinion. And you would probably have to, may agree with that. I think there's more important component elements that are more important than having the building. And I'm not taking away from that building. That building is it's a very good project, I'm sure. I don't agree with it, but it's a very good project. It does a lot, That's my opinion.
Claudia?
I'm still listening.
So, go ahead.
No, I just want to point out a couple things. So, I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about the Mediterranean components, and I just made a point that the buildings that we've made a big deal to discuss and bring up and have caused a lot of the angst are buildings that are way beyond 3.5 and beyond. So the ones that are not falling into today's discussion, they're beyond the discussion. But further to that, what makes up a Mediterranean building is trying to be defined by the code. There's a building, which I happen to like a lot, currently being finished. It's called Villa Valencia. I love it. It's selling for a lot of money. That building did get some bonuses. That building is not Mediterranean. It has really nice architecture. Doesn't have arches, doesn't have anything it's kind of modern, actually. Look at the railings. So I think there's more to say about architecture here than trying to define things from the specific that we've been trying to make it happen.
If I could just give me a minute. In terms of best practices of the 1920s, and in terms of the beautiful Mediterranean architecture that we like, I've written on that topic multiple times. The last time was my PhD dissertation that went over the books and so on. What happened in the 1920s is that there were very good books, and I have some of them in my office and at home, that dealt specifically with the architectural styles. For example, I have one that talks about Northern Italian architectural details. There's another one that talks about lesser known architecture of Spain, not masterpieces, but lesser known. It's really funny how they're very specialized. And those books are picture books from the 1920s, multiple books. Everybody had them in their office. And those were the practices. They look at the book, they say, oh, I'm going to do a Mediterranean building today, so I'm going to learn from that book. When I was many years ago, I worked in Palm Beach briefly, and an architect, showed me the Dutch South African book that was owned by the architect who designed the Dutch South African village. So that's how that happened. They looked at the book and they learned from it, and they did a great job. Those were the practices, the best practices of the 1920s, which, if we follow them, we probably could do better architecture. Doesn't have to be Mediterranean only, could be many things. But we don't follow them. We simply refuse to learn from the good example for whatever reason. And I'm right. And I'm trying to rescue those things. Now, the good news is that today, all of those books from the 20s, all of those magazines are PDFs. They're available online. It's much easier to find that information today than it was 10, 15, than it was when I was a student. There's no excuse.
Let me ask you a question, if I may. In the 1920s, how you built a building and how you designed a building was different than the components that are available today to design or build a building. So shouldn't an architect be able to follow or look at what is available today to be able to design it differently if he's able to get those bonuses?
Well,
Does everything, to me, for example, if you take the Biltmore and you say, here's a Biltmore, here's a plan of the Biltmore, or here's a picture of the Biltmore, every building within the city should look like the Biltmore. To me, I'd have a problem with that. And that's just my opinion. I'm not
But the
saying
Biltmore,
that's anybody here.
the Biltmore, if you allow me, the Biltmore is a modern building. The Biltmore is a steel structure building. Okay, it's a modern building. In the 1920s, some people would do a glass facade, such as Mies van der Rohe tried to come up with those ideas at the very same time, with the same structure. So the aesthetics is a choice. Could be one or another. All I'm saying is, I know why they did a good job in the 20s, because they had best practices that were based on research of design, of features, of details. I know that. It's not a secret. In fact, the books are in the library at the University of Miami and also the Coral Gables Library. If we did that, if we had the educational process or the continuing education or whatever, I think we could raise the quality of the architecture. And it could be many things. It doesn't have to be necessarily Mediterranean. Right now, we're not doing any of that. My message is that we need to start doing that. Instead of trying to think that the zoning code is going to solve all our problems through micromanagement, which was my take on some of the discussion that took place in the committee. To believe that that's going to work its way into quality is just not a good approach.
But to say that the brand, because we can call it the brand of Coral Gables, is Mediterranean, I would prefer to say that the brand of Coral Gables is high-quality architecture or high-quality design. Sure. It's a much better aspirational goal for us to have. Again, a building that's not properly scaled can be called Mediterranean, but if the windows are too wide and not tall enough, they're not going to look Mediterranean. And those things are just good design practices. It goes down to us being rigorous and the Board of Architects doing its job and just being, on top of it. But that's what it boils down to.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I, please. So when does a standard become a style? Because if you look at the 550 building, those have architectural standards, but they certainly don't have Mediterranean style.
Right.
So what makes a balcony go from a standard to a style?
From a zoning point of view?
Yeah, from what we're talking about.
The way we have it in the zoning code, which is these are the 8 buildings that you need to learn from and then apply similar elements and so on. That's the way the zoning code...
But then you never get out of your box then.
Absolutely. That's the limitation of that. So that's really a policy choice.
Right.
You could do it or not do it. Now, the city at different points has decided to do that, and it has worked fairly effectively. We can do better, sure. But I think that the plaza certainly complies, Mr. Beher. I don't think anybody would object to the fact that it complies. And the question is whether the Regions Bank would comply with the changes that we're making.
Or the other project, the Villa Valencia one.
Or Via Valencia.
I mean, I
I want to introduce one
I
more.
think that's the
Don't think that
discussion, the narrow discussion.
No,
we're having.
I mean, my point is that, I hear what Benny's saying. The standards is really what we should, at least in my mind, focus on a little bit more than the actual style. I mean, I don't know.
Could be.
To prove the point a little bit, so there's a building that now is applauded for being saved, and that is the old police and fire station building, which is a brutalist building, which people are happy that it was saved. And that's a building from the 70s, completely goes against any Mediterranean style. And it's applauded to be saved. It's wanted, it's.
Some people, yes.
But I'm
yes.
just saying, is in the fabric of this city, there's a brutalist building that's lauded for being there. So we have different things that happen across the board that are good, and they save.
I think that diversity is always good.
Yeah, like I said, this is a very narrow discussion. This was an issue, again, identified by the commission. They set up a committee. The committee discussed this multiple nights. At the end, we believe that some small changes, very small, from our point of view, were better than some bigger rewrite. So that's what's before you. If you agree with it, fine. If you don't, then that's a perfectly valid position also.
But eliminating all other styles, isn't that a big change?
Yes, for level one, certainly, I think that would be a change, yes.
It's a big change.
Yeah, that's the way.
Yeah, no, it is a change. And again, the prevailing view was the Mediterranean style language needs to be targeted towards Mediterranean. That's what that discussion took place, and of course, Mr. Beher had a different opinion.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, but there's other standards. There's green buildings. I mean, those standards are important to me. They might not be Mediterranean.
And we have the lead requirement for buildings and so on. Absolutely. All of this is policy. Again, it's a choice that we make, and the brand of the city depends on that choice, certainly. But I think that the MED bonus program has served the city fairly well, and that we can make it better through some changes. I do believe that's the case.
Okay.
I wanted to say that I also lean towards the high quality rather than marrying ourselves to one particular style. I think that limits us too much, and like my colleagues were saying, it's a big change.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is that from the practical issue of reviewing projects, it's easier if it's more targeted towards Mediterranean than if you open it up. If you open it up, we can argue for a long time. So that's just the practical issue here.
Any other comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion not to recommend not to approve this
As written?
item as written. The only thing I will maybe approve is the optional submittal to the Board of Architects.
The optional
optional.
conceptual review.
But I don't think it's a good thing to get rid of all the other.
But if that's the case, then shouldn't it come back written a different way?
Well, Mr. Chairman, actually, the way it's written, you could bifurcate it, because the way the ordinance is written, there's one section relating to the conceptual
Correct.
submission, and the balance of the ordinance is related to the Mediterranean style for level 1. So I think you could make a recommendation, if that's the desire of the board, that you recommend approval of the conceptual, but recommend denial of the limitation on the Mediterranean style.
Is that your motion, Robert?
Yes, that's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any seconds? Any discussion? No, call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. We move on now to E4. Mr. Collins?
Item E4, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code, amending Article 14 process, Section 14-200 procedures, Section 14-202 general development review procedures, Section 14-202.9 certificate of use, to provide the city manager or designee with authority to deny, suspend, or revoke a certificate of use under specific circumstances, providing for severability, repeal or codification, and effective date. Item E4, public hearing.
Mr. Trias?
Mr. Chairman, this is to allow for a process to deny, suspend, or revoke a certificate of use by the city manager. The process is spelled out in great detail, but it's basically something that ostensibly will be used rarely if needed.
Can you go through a little bit and just give us some examples why you'd want to use this, even if it's rare?
Well, if the applicant provides false information, they say they're going to do something and then something else shows up.
And that's not already written in the code? Or
It doesn't, not in the certificate of use process. I mean, this allows for a very efficient way to deal with issues that otherwise you would have code enforcement and it would be a little more complicated. Okay. That's basically, or if there's some criminal activity going on, those kinds of things.
But isn't that something that the code already makes provision for that? You know, because when I read revoked, you know, that seems to me that, you know, I just don't want to have a capricious, you know, from the city manager or designee to says we're going to revoke something.
Well, there are five reasons. I mean, it's not capricious. I mean, if you look at it as the applicant provided false or misleading information, okay, that's one. There's a failure to comply with the terms and conditions of the certificate of use. Number two, okay. Number three, there's a violation of the regulations of the code. Number four, the premises is allowed to be utilized for illegal activity. I mean, it's not open-ended.
But don't we have already set rules that the city could go out and revoke a certificate of use?
Well,
I would find it that I'm sure that we have the mechanism today.
As you can imagine, this is not something that came from the planning staff. I think the city attorney initiated this, and maybe you can explain this further.
Well, I think this provides an expedited process, and I believe the concern is that the process exists for zoning code enforcement didn't allow where there are exigent circumstances where action needed to be taken immediately, and I believe there's actually a process for an expedited appeal. And,
yes.
And it actually gives the applicant two choices. It can go an expedited appeal, so it can be reviewed immediately whether the action is taken as appropriate, or it can go through the normal procedure for appeals. So there's a recognition that this is done when there's a situation that requires a certain immediate action, and there's also a need to understandably to protect the property owner by giving them an expedited ability to have it reviewed.
Mr. Attorney, if the user is in compliance and, you know, there's an application to revoke that certificate of use, the user has to come in on an emergency. You know, if they're in violation, they gotta be revoked, suspend, whatever. I agree 100%. Are we putting a burden on those users that, you know, how do we prove that they're not in compliance?
Well, I mean, and I think the bigger question is, are we more concerned about people coming into compliance, or are we more concerned with beating them over the head with something? I mean, isn't the whole code enforcement appeal process 10 days to correct your, I mean, what happens to that process now? Is that no longer honored? If the thing that bothers me the most subjective thing to me is the thing about or activity not permitted under the zoning code of Coral Gables. Not criminal activity, but under the zoning code of Coral Gables. So, you know, I remember there used to be a tuxedo shop on where your favorite building is there, on a circle there. And every graduation, they would put a big banner up that said, rent your tuxedos here for prom. Well, that was obviously in violation of our banner code, but by the time it went through the process, the 10 days, that was taken down and everything. So I guess my concern is, if we have a process for code enforcement and it's meeting in front of the code enforcement board and explaining what your issue is that now no longer, is that taken away from the citizen?
Well, it's an additional process that may result in that.
But I mean, is that taken away? Does the citizen no longer have the right to appeal?
No, the citizen has a right to an appeal. I mean, we have two types of appeals, as the city attorney explained.
So you have two avenues. It may be advantageous for a property user who's found to be not in compliance to do this expedited appeal process, so it gets heard essentially immediately. The appeal process, there's another appeal process which is significantly more time, which is also in the hands of the property owner. So the property owner has really a choice of whether they want to utilize this expedited process for a review, or they want to go through the traditional process.
So it's a notice of, we're going to withdraw your certificate. It's not an immediate withdrawal of your certificate of use.
No, I don't think that's, what this says is.
And this is that's my fear.
That's my whole point.
No, I want to make it very clear. What it says is, under subsection C, the city manager or designee may deny, suspend, or revoke a certificate of use for good cause, including but not limited to one of the following reasons. And there are 5 reasons that qualify that
I think the key word is suspend.
Mr. Trias mentioned. Further, there's 2 options upon the denial under these circumstances. As I said, either the traditional.
But are you
or
guilty
expedited.
and you have to prove yourself innocent, or are you innocent and have to prove yourself guilty? I mean, what's the cart before the horse here on this? Are you assumed? Are you assumed that you're innocent and you're in violation and you have to prove that you're not? Or are you,
Well, in the case if the city manager determines to revoke your, let's say in a particular case, the city manager determines to revoke your certificate of use because you provided false or misleading information. Let's take an example.
That's a no-brainer, okay.
No, but all of these have specific things. There's a failure to comply with the conditions of the certificate of use. If you're appealing it, then as an appellant, it's your burden to say why the city manager was wrong in his determination. As an appellant, it becomes your burden. This is not a criminal case where there's certain presumptions of innocence that are attached to a criminal defendant. This is in the context of zoning where there's failure to comply. It's a policy issue of whether the city manager should be given this authority, and it's really up to the board to decide how you feel about it.
Look,
I'm sorry.
and I'm gonna use the example, along Ponce de Leon, there used to be those massage places. Obviously, those were not, they were illegal, you know. Those have to go, I agree, and there should be a case, but I think that today we have the necessary tools to do
But
that.
that's what I want to ask for 1 second. So if you're selling CBD or vaping or alcohol near school, what are the ramifications currently if this didn't apply? The code compliance comes and says,
Yeah.
what, and gives you a fine?
Well,
What can they do?
not a fine only.
What will they do?
It depends on the violation.
Let's say it's a strong violation.
But the process will be code enforcement and speaking to the board, and then the board decides. one
So
way or the
this would immediately give the manager or designee the right to revoke that certificate of use.
Yes, that's what it says.
Before we continue, just, Jill, do we have any speakers on this?
No, we don't.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it to public comment. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say that just by reading it at face value, I'm not really in favor of this item, just because I know that it is such a difficult and drawn-out process to get a certificate of use in the first place. And then all of a sudden, we're going to give the authority to revoke it. And I think that places an undue burden on the person who holds a certificate of use, because, yeah, they may get a speedy appeal, but maybe they're not ready to appeal that. Isn't there another process already in place that allows them to remedy whatever the offense is of any of these five? Obviously, if it's criminal activity or something like that. But, you know, number two, there is a failure to comply with the terms or conditions of the certificate of use. I think that that's something that's very vague, and that's something that can be, you know, interpreted differently by the city. The city can say, well, the terms, I mean, I've even heard of applicants for certificate of use having responses from our cities, and they've been citing Wikipedia as a reason to deny a certificate of use, which for me is just, I can't believe that would even happen. So if it takes a long time to get a certificate of use, well, then maybe it should take a long time to lose it as well, and let it go through the process. I just don't want to be putting undue burden. I agree, you know, I understand I think there's a process already in place, and I understand that in some cases it takes longer, but then that's what just has to happen so that we don't unnecessarily burden these certificate of use holders, and make sure that that everybody's going through the process on both sides. If it takes long, it takes long.
And
To get
Claudia,
it,
I agree with you to a certain extent, but if you do have an establishment that is doing illegal things, how do we secure that could be revoked immediately, not go through a process?
well, aren't there other legal remedies, like the police, for instance? If you're selling drugs out of an establishment, there has to be another remedy, another avenue to attack it. It doesn't have to be just, pulling their certificate of use.
But if, I mean, and I'm trying to, because I agree with you in many aspects. I'm trying to look at this as, okay, if somebody is conducting an illegal business, that by the time the police goes, by the time, we get code enforcement, you're going to be selling or doing something illegal. That, how do we, is there, again, Mr. Attorney, do we have the mechanism today to prevent that, or no? And this is the reason for this.
I believe that the purpose for this, as I understand it, is to have a way that the city manager can expedite a process to deal with properties that fit within these categories. If the board feels that the categories need to be narrower, and that is, of course, an option to you, or you could choose to recommend denial.
I'm looking at it, I'm sorry, from the perspective of the greatest good. Where could we do the greatest good? Now, you said yourself when we started this item that this is going to be a rare occasion. So I'm looking to protect the certificate of use holder that maybe there was some kind of misinformation or misunderstanding or something that could easily be corrected, I don't think that their certificate of use should be pulled. And so if this is going to be something that's going to happen every once in a blue moon, and, you know, it's going to be an issue every once in a while, then I'm not leaning towards being in favor of this item.
Two things. You mentioned something limiting this. It begins by saying any good cause, including but not limited to, so that completely opens it up.
Question also.
So that's out the window. But can there be a grace period so that basically any discussions had within 30 days must be, I don't know, something to give that buffer so that you're not automatically out on the street on the next day? You have some, I'm just wondering how to.
And I think that when you're in business, 30 days is not a very long time.
So when does the clock start on misinformation? Is it during the review with planning and zoning? Does it start with commission voting on it? When does the misinformation, when does that appear? Because I'll give you an example. If someone says that we're not going to do this with this building, we're not going to have student housing in here, and it turns out that it is student housing, and it was presented as not being student housing, is that a violation? Is that misleading information?
You know, it's something that's going to have to be judged on a case-by-case basis.
By one person, the city manager.
For the city manager makes a well, he's been given the authority here to determine whether it's misleading information, and if that information was relied upon by the commission and the approval, and if it's material, then yes, he would have that authority to do that. And then there's, of course, the authority to appeal. And the appeal would be, well, wait, what I did was not misleading. So that's the purpose for the expedited appeal. But again, this is a policy decision of this board. If this board feels uncomfortable with this, that's why you all are here.
So let's say it was determined to be misleading, and you have a condominium or an apartment with 300 people in it, and they no longer have a certificate of use. What happens? I'm not just talking about a restaurant that can't flip burgers tomorrow, but you have a large building that houses 300 people. What's the remedy for that?
Well, the remedy is for the condominium, if it's a certificate of use, the remedy is to appeal the decision of the city manager.
But can the action be stayed while that is happening? Because the answer to that is right now is not. So you're automatically on the street until you go back through this process.
Yeah.
And I'm just.
Yeah, I don't. There's no provision for a stay. The board could of course recommend that there should be a stay pending the appeal.
Again, I just wanted to say that I'm not here defending the criminal. I'm defending the businesses and the buildings, as Chip pointed out. You know, I just don't think that the city manager should. Again, you're saying the intent is for something to be few and far between, but he could very well say, well, let's pull certificates here, 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 and here. And what happens then? Well, it's legal. And I don't know, I'm not comfortable with it still.
There's another place where this can go right, and it's that 50% rule for food and liquor that is one of the big things for our city, that you can't sell liquor unless you're selling. And that's always been a great spot. So, I mean, you could always close down an establishment there. Great.
I mean, look, every valet guy in the city has violated their certificate of use. I guarantee you that much. Yeah.
So if you feel that this is wrong, then vote against it. I mean,
Or
powerful
would we want to ask them to come back with a more defined?
I think we already have a process in place, and, you know, and again, since they said it was something that was every once in a while, I don't see why we need to make a change for something that's every once in a while, why they even brought it to us. If it's something that's happening all the time and it's an issue and it's a problem, then I can see why this would be an item on our agenda. But if it's something that's so few and far between, and there's already a process in place, and it opens a door to pulling people's certificate of use, you know, from 1 minute to the next, I'm not in favor of that, I think.
That goes to my question. What is the current ramification under the code? Folks that are breaking the rules. What is the process?
Well, I mean, I'm familiar with a couple of cases in which there is no certificate of use, and there's a business operating. So, I mean, we're talking about dealing with things that are black and white. I mean, I don't think that the subtleties and so on really apply to this. This, or at least that's the way I understand the intent. There's a process, sure.
But here's my
there's-
question. So code compliance gets involved, and I don't know if this is true or false. Their process takes 3 months of back and forth with the $100 a day tickets, and nothing happens for 3 months. You've given nothing to the city attorney, I mean, to the city manager to take action on matters that just drag out. If that's the case, then you need to have a tool. And I'm not sure that's true or false, but what are the problems that just drag on and drag on? If they do, then they have to have some.
Yeah, and I think
I don't know.
that's the tool. I don't think there's any intention of being arbitrary about this. I think there's a real need to, in some extreme cases, to do something.
Yeah, but
That's-
let me tell you, I am gonna, I'm not, it depends who is making those determinations. If we go back, I don't know, for lack of a number, 17 years ago, and the city manager that we had at the time capriciously said, you know what, I'm gonna revoke that. We're putting a burden on that user to prove himself, it was, he's not in violation. Okay, and that's my problem with this.
But I also think what I'm hearing is that it's actually the city attorney that's coming with this, that needs a better tool. Is that not correct?
I don't know, actually. Maybe, Ramon, do you know where, is this coming from the city attorney, the city manager? It's probably a combination of the two. So
Yeah, this was drafted by the city attorney's office, so.
it was drafted by the city attorney's office. Actually, I was involved somewhat in the draft. I don't know
The
if
origin.
it was generated by the city attorney or the city manager, but the city attorney is very comfortable with the legality of the ordinance.
And if we could give the city attorney or, whoever, more tools that there's a true violation, I'm all for it. And I'm gonna use the example of that massage parlor. used to be.
What's the level of the sin? What's the level of the violation? I mean, there's certainly a difference between a parking ticket and running a red light. So where is the level of what is that point where you violated? Now I'm going to there's no
When does it become egregious?
there's no standard as to what's a violation and what's not a violation.
Is there a list of illegal uses in the city?
Yeah, I mean, you could be blocking the sidewalk with your tables and chairs and be violating. I mean, so I just don't think there's any standard on the violation, and it gives someone the right to just.
The power, it gives them the power, and that's what I'm uncomfortable with, giving
I'm
it
a
to
law and
one
order
person.
guy. I'm a purely law and order guy, but there's a point where I think individuals have to.
If you're not comfortable with the amendment, vote against it. I mean,
Can we defer and let city attorney tell us where they're having difficulty and why this is needed? Is that fair? I mean, I don't want to take something that they really think.
I think you would be better off making a recommendation and indicating that as part of your comments.
In other words, making a recommendation of denial with that as part of the comments? Is
And
that
as
what?
part of your comments, that the board is concerned about the, whatever it is that you've expressed. You express as far as why this is needed and why the alternate process is not available, or you're concerned because it doesn't indicate the level of how serious it is, or you can just say nothing and just do a straight denial, if that's
I'm
the
in favor
desire
of
the
that
board.
version.
So would you like to make a motion
Sure. I make the motion to deny.
with any
No,
recommendation?
no recommend, just deny. I mean, our discussion is on the record as to why.
you don't need to make a recommendation in the sense that the minutes are included. So if you want to do that, that's fine. If you want to make a recommendation, that's fine.
I think the minutes will suffice.
We have a motion?
I want to make an amendment. I defer to the city attorney. I think they know what they're talking about, and there's a need I'd like to hear from that particular person before we say absolutely not. So I would say that denied, but tell us why you need it, and we would reconsider.
But wouldn't that be then a deferral as
Or
opposed to?
maybe it should be a deferral.
To Chip's point, there are
Well,
different
we,
violations in the spectrum, right?
But you have a motion.
we have a motion, and Vinny wants to make an amendment. Do you accept his amendment or not?
No.
So we don't.
So there's no second.
Is there,
Took you out at the knees, my man.
before, though.
Took you out at the knees.
does,
Can I say something?
yes,
To his point, there are spectrum violations, right? Why cannot a recommendation be that, number one, we feel uncomfortable with putting so much power in the city manager's office, forgetting who the city manager is. But if there is illegal uses going on, then the city should be able to have the right to say, forget it, shut it down. So why cannot a recommendation be, provide a list of illegal uses that can give the right to the city to shut something down? But these are illegal uses, that there is a consensus that they're illegal uses. And then, at that point, maybe the city manager has the right to implement his force based on these illegal uses. Anything else has to go through the
But you're saying specific legal uses, like you want to define them, because like I said, number 2, failure to comply with the terms or conditions, those terms have to be looked at, those terms can be argued over, those conditions can be argued over. That's what I'm saying, that, are you saying that they're going to say, well, specifically for this, 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 and this? Because we're not going to be able to tell, if it's going to be such a broad blanket, and then what they're going to come back with are also more generalized terms, then we're not doing anything.
I actually would like for the city attorney's office to be specific. I mean, there are things that come to my mind right now that should be totally legal. I don't think we need any help on that. Make a list of things that are absolutely legal, and then at that point, the city attorney, the city manager said, this is absolutely legal, shut it down. Everything else has to go through a normal process.
I think you'd
There
have
is
to
item
rewrite.
4. I just wanted to read to you one of the items. I don't know if this satisfies the board as maybe your recommendation is limited to item number 4. But item number 4 says the premise is allowed to be utilized for illegal criminal activity or activity not permitted under the zoning code or city code. I don't know if that's sufficient enough.
Here's where I'm lost. Okay, there's a noise ordinance that applies in certain places of the city. I know a place that sits next to another place, and the noise is very objectionable to one party. Totally a problem. The police gets called. Finally, the chief comes by and says, "You either be quiet, I'm going to shut you down." Under what terms can he shut them down? It's a zoning. All he can do is say, "You're not following the zoning code. I'm going to shut you down." What does that mean? Until I know what that means, I can't tell you I'm going to go beyond that and give more power or less power. What does that mean?
No, but you may recall the noise discussion. We had a scientist here playing noise and explaining this is noise, etc. You can endlessly micromanage this thing. I think that at the end of the day, my only advice to you is that we need a document that is practical and can be used. We cannot list, it's impossible to list all the possible uses.
Correct.
That's just not realistic.
It's impossible. We have a motion.
I just wanted to put on the record that I'm all for giving the city more tools to be able to do their job, but I would have felt more comfortable if they had a laundry list of, hey, this is an issue. But you come to me and you tell me this is a once in a blue moon, and then you should have had that information to be ready to answer those questions as to why we're doing this, so that we don't have to ask the city attorney why she's asking for this. Yes.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Chip, second? Any further discussion?
Oh, one last thing. I think it's a good idea what Vinny said, though. City attorney coming and saying what was the impetus to move this forward. Is there an issue out there that we're not aware of? I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel.
A motion to defer is always in order, if that's the choice of the board.
Right
There's
now,
a motion to deny and a second.
Right now, there's a motion to deny.
Yeah.
any other discussion? No. Call the roll, please.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Luis Revolta,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes.
Okay.
This is a rough group tonight, isn't it?
Next is E5.
Guys, make-
Let's get moving. Mr. Call.
Item E5, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code by amending Article 14 process, Section 14-103.2, membership terms, vacancies, removal to allow certain percentage of Board of Architect members to not be residents or have their principal place of business in the City of Coral Gables, providing for severability, repeal, or codification, and an effective date.
Mr. Chairman, currently the Board of Architects has at least 7 members, and they all need to be residents or have their place of business in the City of Coral Gables. This amendment says that no less than 5 of the members will have to be residents or have their principal place of business in the city. And the idea is that that may open up the membership more widely than right now.
So 2 would be able to be from the outside.
2 or more, because
more.
we have more.
I think this is a very good idea. I think that it gives the ability to bring other architects to the board that may not be residing or practicing in Coral Gables. I think this is good.
Do we have any speakers?
No.
No speakers. I'll close it for public comment. Chip?
I'm going to defer to the distinguished colleagues to my right that deal with this day to day, because I have really no opinion on this. Because I don't know what the advantages or disadvantages. I understand the advantage to bring in outside views is good. I understand that we might need more physical bodies is good.
And Chip, I think that's probably one of the reasons to be able to bring more,
Yeah.
Opportunities that not, just limit, because you have the same board member to year after year to serve, because there's not a
And
bigger
the
pool.
members are appointed by the city manager, by the way. I just want to make that clear.
Say that again, please.
The members are appointed by the city manager. That's the process.
Understood.
If you close it to the public hearing already,
I already did.
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
I didn't get a chance to say anything.
No comments.
Wait,
But we want to remove the provision of the city manager being allowed to.
wait.
Lots of time to be here, Vinny.
That's the way it is today.
I know.
We have a motion by Robert. Who made the second? Vinny made
But
the second.
I'm gonna accept a,
Oh, no, wait, is this going to be open for discussion? after
Yes.
the- Go ahead.
Claudia,
Any second.
you wanted to,
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say something. So I hear what you're saying about, opening up the pool to a larger, talent of architects, right? But at the same time, I also wanted to say that I think that those of us who live in Coral Gables because there's certain things about the characteristics of Coral Gables, whether it be, the architecture or the quality of life that we enjoy. And so I tend to lean towards the side that I would like people who sit on the Board of Architecture to have that kind of affinity. But at the same time, I also see that limited real estate in Coral Gables can affect that. And I'm open to some outside talent.
Claudia, and I'm gonna use the example, and this is Mr. Trias will probably agree with me. If you have a Robert Stern, very distinguished architect, who would wanna serve on the board today, and he does not, reside, or
We're
we
missing
wouldn't be able
out.
to do it. And that's
Understand.
what this, I think,
Maybe Robert Stern wants to move part-time to Coral Gables.
maybe.
Maybe. No, but certainly that's an option that I think makes it easier to find people. Anybody who wants to serve on the board should be commended. Because frankly, it's every week, it's several hours a week, and so on, so.
I did it for 10 years, and it's a very difficult, and takes a lot of time. And I think that this just gives the opportunity to have a bigger pool.
Is there a maximum right now of outside architects that can serve as a board? It's 100%.
It's 0 right now, so the idea is to have 2 out of the 7 minimum.
Yeah, 2 or more if needed.
But I think there should be a cap. Because at some point, if you don't put a cap, it could be 7 architects from somewhere else.
Well, the 5 have to be from here.
Right, but he's saying, what if we have 100 architects and only
Then-
5 are
then
from here?
There's an automatic cap.
Well,
5 have to be from here and 2 are.
you could have 100 members, yes, that is true, and that is true. So we don't have that, and the idea is that right now I think we have 8. I think that's the number. I mean, it's never been more than that, so we could change that if
To
we need
50% of the,
I actually think 50% would be too much. I think.
Yeah, it was easier to say 5 so we can count, as opposed to 50% because, 2 of them resigned, so now it's not 50% anymore, so.
So the Board of Architects has what, a 3-person hearing and then a full board hearing? Is that
Yes.
how it works?
Yes.
So is there going to be restriction that if, on the 3, is it have to be one of the 3 or
I
how's that?
don't think so at this point.
Just so it could be,
yeah,
2 of the 3 could be out of town
possibly
foreigners, yeah, we don't want
foreigners from the country. Who knows? Maybe Robert Stern comes from New York over the weekend.
Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second? No?
I made a motion.
Right, we have a motion and a second.
Your motion saying that at least a certain percentage of the board needs to be residents, or you are leaving it open?
It says 5 minimum.
It says. Exactly.
But then you guys should say 50%?
Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 8, or there will never be a case that there's 10 members in the case that the city gets busy. I just don't think.
When I
I'm
bring
in
something
agreement
to
with
you,
Robert, it should be 50%, but I think a percentage
I
between
think-
25 and 30, it's a logical, healthy.
But if you do 5, well, I mean, listen, however,
when I bring something to you, is from the point of view of making it easy to implement. That's why it's written the way it's written.
I will go ahead, just for clarification, make the motion to approve with the condition as presented to us.
So we have it second. Okay. Any other discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
David Eisenstadt.
Yes.
And then for the record, I want to nominate Mr. Revuelta to serve on the Board of Architects.
What a great idea that is, Robert.
Okay, let's go on to the next item. The next item is E6. Mr. Caller?
Item E6, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to Article 14 process, Section 14-214, protection of landowners' rights, relief from inordinate burdens of the City of Coral Gables official zoning code to clarify procedures to resolve disputes and provide relief from application of the zoning code, including the granting of variances, providing for severability, repeal or codification, and effective date. Item E6, public hearing. Ramon, you want to explain this, or I can?
You can, I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
This is really more of a housekeeping measure, just a slight modification in how we handle claims under Bert Harris, inordinate burdens, and just it's really a clarification that you have the authority to grant variances in order to provide relief. I don't think it's materially different than how it's being done now, but we received a decision from the court where we felt that it would be good to fine-tune this. So that's what's been done.
Any speakers on this, Jill?
No.
At this point, I'll go ahead and close it for public comment. Anybody on the board have any questions or comments, or anybody want to make a motion? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
We have motion, Vinnie. Second? Louis, second. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miro,
Yes.
Avi Eisenstadt.
Yes. And the last item on the agenda, E7.
Item E7, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code by amending Article 10 parking, Section 10-110, amount of required parking, and Article 16 definitions to clarify parking requirements related to single-family building alterations and to update the definition of a single-family residence regarding the use of covered open-air walkways and location of porticoches and carports, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and an effective date.
Mr. Trias?
Mr. Chairman, some minor changes that relate to single-family houses. As you know, in the code update, we didn't deal with single-family houses, so this is something a little bit separate. One of them is we're just simply saying single-family residence or duplex, so it's obvious. Another one is that the carport has to be attached to the house. Another one is that the porte cochere has to be in the front of the building. And finally, that the connection of different areas of the house could be a walkway, as opposed to an enclosed air-conditioned space.
What was
A
that?
a walkway.
What was that the last one, please?
Sometimes you may have a house that has two sections, and those sections are connected. And we're saying specifically that there has to be a roof connection, but it doesn't have to be enclosed. Meaning it could be just a covered walkway.
And does that have to be a continuous attachment? For example, what happens if you have a cantilever that is at one height and then a bottom part for design purposes is a little bit lower where they overlap?
And there's some open space.
So there
yeah,
is-
I think that would be fine.
You think that would be fine, or we're
I mean,
good
if
with
it's
it?
architecturally appropriate, obviously, I mean, it's, unless I see a design, I really can't tell. But the idea is that right now, every square foot of the house has to be enclosed. So sometimes if you, let's say, have a big lot and want to have a separate pavilion and so on, so that doesn't count as part of your house. It's a technical thing. So we're saying, as long as you're connected, you don't have to air condition that connection.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, before you're allowed a certain percentage of your home to be, let's say, a storage room or a auxiliary, and you didn't have to connect that. Is that correct?
That still remains, and I don't think that's what we're talking about here.
Okay.
What we're talking about here is that,
But
let's say,
now somebody can make a bigger square footage.
Yeah.
As long as they connect it and it doesn't have to be air conditioned.
yeah.
So it basically allows for a more liberal design.
If you're doing a courtyard, for example, and that courtyard has a colonnade, and you have, let's say, 2 pods attached to it, that would be okay. Right now, it's not okay.
Does it matter whether it's on the front exposure? Does it matter if it's on the back? Could it be anywhere on the property?
Yes, within the review process that we have, obviously.
Okay.
So is a carport on the side of a home that goes through and goes into a parking structure behind it, is that considered a carport or a portico?
That's a carport. A porte cochere has to be in the front.
So on the side, you can have a carport.
Yes.
And you can drive through it.
Yes.
You just can't have a portico share that you can drive through on the side.
Right. What was happening is that sometimes people would do a detached porte cochere and say, well, a porte cochere doesn't say that it has to be attached.
I understand. Yeah, I understand.
And
But,
then, yeah.
but what I'm saying is, why don't I just, instead of calling it a portico share, why don't I just call it a carport?
No, a carport is fine, and that's.
I know, that's what I'm saying. If I want to have a carport, if I want to have a portico share in the back of my house, why don't I just call it a carport?
Yeah, and if it were to be in the front, it would be a porte cochere. There you go.
definition by location.
I don't know, that makes sense.
The main issue is that for whatever reason, some architects were saying, well, I don't have to attach it, it could be, and that's where it creates some
I
problems.
understand.
Discussion, or can I make a motion?
Are there anybody for discussion on this item for the public?
No,
No?
not on
I'll
Zoom.
go ahead and close the floor to the public.
I'd like to make a motion to approve this item.
Second.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Vinnie Torre,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Claudia Miron,
Yes.
Luis Revuelta,
Yes.
Avi Eisenstadt.
Yes. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's an extra meeting. And I'm sure the city appreciates it as much
Don't
as we
forget,
all
we're
do.
doing it again next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
We were kind of tough tonight, weren't we?
205.5. Be ashamed of yourself.
Hey, so Sven, you're in Philly, so what's the
Robert
carport?
Behar.
You can drive through the carport.